Have you ever wondered why, even after thousands of years, the conflict between Jews and Arabs continues to escalate? What is the root of the constant tension, not only between nations, but even within Muslim countries themselves? Well, brace yourself, because the answer lies in a Bible story that most people have heard, but few truly understand. Two brothers stand at the center of history, Isaac and Ishmael. Both sons of Abraham, yet their lives took completely different paths. Isaac became the father of the Jewish people. Ishmael became the father of the Arab and Muslim nations. But here is the part that will surprise you. These two men hold the secret key to understanding one of the world's longest and most bitter conflicts. A struggle that's been passed down for thousands of years. And what if I told you? The Bible doesn't just explain why the conflict began, it also reveals how it will end. Yes, that's right. Hidden in its pages is a moment where Isaac and Ishmael meet again, not as enemies, but as brothers. And many believe this scene points to the ultimate peace between Jews and Arabs. Can you imagine that? The war we see today, resolved in a way no one expects. What happened in that moment? And what does it mean for the future of these two nations? Drop a 777 in the comments if you're ready to uncover the answer, because once you see it, you'll never look at today's headlines the same way again. So why have Jews and Arabs been at war for so long? The Bible gives a shocking answer. In ancient Jewish teaching, there is a principle called Ma Esi Avot Simin Lebanim, which means the deeds of the fathers are signs for the children. At first, it might sound poetic, maybe even symbolic, but it's far more than that. It has a prophetic truth, meaning that the events in the lives of the patriarchs aren't just history. They're patterns, blueprints that shape the future. The Apostle Paul later taught a similar concept to the early Christians. He called it typology, the idea that people and events in the Old Testament are shadows of things yet to come. Every story was pointing forward, carrying a hidden meaning for those willing to see it. Now think about this. What if the ongoing struggle between Jews and Arabs, and even the tension between Israel and much of the Muslim world, was written into history from the very beginning? Not in a peace treaty, but in a family drama. When you look through this prophetic lens, something amazing happens. The story of Isaac and Sarah on one side, and Ishmael and Hagar on the other, suddenly explains the deep divide. In Jewish tradition, Isaac and Sarah represent Israel, the covenant people. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael and Hagar are honored as the roots of the Arab and Muslim nations. This means the conflict isn't just about politics or borders. It's about family. Two brothers, two legacies. And once you see it this way, the entire story starts to make sense. But what caused this ancient fracture? It all began with a divine promise, a covenant wrapped in hope. God looked upon Abraham and gave him a staggering prophecy. I will make you into a great nation, and through you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Genesis 12, 2-3. But as the days dragged on, that promise felt like a mirage. Abraham's wife Sarai was barren. In a time when a woman's honor was measured by her ability to bear children, her infertility brought not only sorrow, but social disgrace. Can you imagine carrying the weight of that silence year after year? Later, God changed her name to Sarah, meaning princess. But what kind of royalty was she? She must have wondered. If she couldn't even give Abraham an heir, could you carry such a title while battling the sting of unfulfilled promises? As decades passed, the promise began to fade into the background of daily disappointments. Eventually, Sarah's desperation overcame her faith. In a moment that would alter history forever, she turned to Abraham and said, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave." Her name was Hagar, an Egyptian servant. In their culture, this act was permissible, but spiritually, it was an attempt to fulfill divine purpose through human intervention. How often do we do the same, trying to force what only God can give? And so it was. Abraham lay with Hagar, and she conceived, but the joy was short-lived. Sarah, once the initiator of this plan, now burned with envy. She mistreated Hagar out of her own wounded pride. The servant who once obeyed became a target of resentment. Oppressed and pregnant, Hagar fled into the wilderness. Imagine her there alone, afraid, unseen, no home, no protection, no future. Have you ever felt like Hagar, running from something too painful to face, yet not knowing where to go? But the wilderness wasn't empty. It never is. Beside a spring in the desert, an angel of the Lord appeared, not to judge, but to comfort. He called her by name, acknowledged her suffering, and gave her a message that would echo through generations. Return to your mistress and submit to her. I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Genesis 16:9-10. Hagar, stunned and humbled, named her unborn son Ishmael God hears, because in that barren land God had heard her pain. Can you feel the weight of that moment? A rejected servant becomes the mother of nations. A single encounter in the desert sparks a lineage that will one day stand toe-to-toe with Israel itself. But what happens next in this prophetic family drama? Stay with this story. The ending is far more shocking than you can imagine. In the book of Genesis, a mysterious prophecy quietly emerges, one that still sends ripples through our world today. It is spoken not with thunder, but with chilling precision. As the angel speaks to Hagar, he foretells the destiny of her unborn son Ishmael. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will dwell in hostility toward all his brothers. Genesis 16:12. Let that linger in your spirit for a moment. This ancient verse, uttered in the silence of a desert wilderness thousands of years ago, mirrors the headlines we read today. It may sound unsettling, perhaps even offensive to modern ears, but it is not a curse. It is a divine revelation, a blueprint of what was to come. But what does it mean to be a wild donkey of a man? In our culture, the term might feel crude or dismissive. Yet in the ancient Near East, the wild donkey symbolized untamed freedom, a creature that roamed the wilderness, fearless and free, bowing to no yoke. This was not an insult. It was a portrait of fierce independence. Have you ever known someone who refused to be broken no matter the pressure? This was Ishmael, the survivor, the untethered wanderer, the child of the desert. The prophecy foretold a people who would endure strong, proud, unbroken. But in that strength also lay a shadow, conflict. The angel declared that Ishmael's hand would be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, not because of hatred, but because of the tension that comes when freedom meets resistance. Can a nation forged in struggle ever fully rest? Hagar obeyed the command. She returned to Sarah, and in time gave birth to a son. Abraham named him Ishmael God. Here's a name that bore witness to Hagar's suffering and God's response. As Abraham cradled his firstborn, can you imagine the relief flooding his heart? After all the waiting, all the wondering, he now held the living promise in his arms. For 13 long years, Ishmael was Abraham's only son, the embodiment of hope, legacy, and answered prayer. During those years, Ishmael was not just a child. He was the future. Abraham taught him, raised him, perhaps dreamed that through this son, the nations God spoke of would rise. Could any father look at his child and not believe that the promise had been fulfilled? And yet that same prophetic word still loomed over him. The wild donkey, spirit-free and untamable, remained. Today, many look at the Arab people, proud and enduring, and recognize this same spirit. Their resilience in the face of adversity, their refusal to be conquered, their deep ancestral pride, it echoes the desert's prophecy. But prophecy is a double-edged sword. Alongside that strength came a sorrowful prediction. Ishmael would live in conflict, not just with outsiders, but with his own brothers. And tragically, history has unfolded accordingly. From ancient disputes to the present-day divisions between Sunni and Shia Muslims, the Islamic world has often been torn from within. Think of the wars in Syria. In Yemen, brother fighting brother, nation tearing against nation. Was this not exactly what Genesis warned would come? The prophecy didn't stop with internal strife. It hinted at a coming fracture, far deeper one, that would define the spiritual and geopolitical tensions of the modern age. The true spark, the deeper layer of this age-old struggle, would be revealed when a second child was born, another son, another promise. Who would this second son be? And what would happen when the child of the Spirit met the child of the flesh? That moment, one that would change the course of history, is just ahead. Years slipped by like sand through open fingers. Sarah was now 90 years old, well beyond the years of childbearing, and the promise of God that once filled her with expectation had become a source of quiet sorrow. Her womb remained empty, and with each sunrise, hope seemed more like a fading memory. She had made peace, or so she told herself, with the idea that Ishmael would carry Abraham's legacy forward. Perhaps this was how the promise would unfold through Hagar's son, not hers. Could it be that God had forgotten her? Or worse, had he chosen someone else? Then one day, the ordinary cracked open to reveal the extraordinary. As the heat of the day hung heavy in the air, Abraham, now 99 years old, sat at the entrance of his tent. That's when they appeared, three strangers, travelers unknown, yet somehow majestic. Abraham rushed to show, offering water, rest, and food, not knowing these visitors were no ordinary men. One of them, speaking with divine authority, uttered a shocking prophecy. "I will surely return to you this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son." Genesis 18:10. Inside the tent, hidden behind the cloth walls, Sarah heard those words and laughed, but it was not the laughter of joy. It was the bitter, hollow laugh of a woman whose heart had grown calloused with disappointment. After all these years, how could she dare to believe again? Have you ever reached a point where even hope feels like a cruel trick? Strangely, Abraham's response was not what we might expect either. When God confirmed that the covenant, the eternal promise, would come through this new child, Abraham's first thought turned not to celebration, but to pleading. "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Genesis 17:18. This was the cry of a father torn between love and obedience. For 13 years, Ishmael had been his only son. He had watched him grow, had taught him, laughed with him, dreamed through him. Could God now pass over this child so easily? But God's answer was unwavering. Ishmael would be blessed, yes, but the covenant, the chosen lineage, would come through Isaac, the child yet to be born. And true to his word, God did what seemed impossible. Sarah, barren all her life, conceived and gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, Yitzhak in Hebrew, meaning he will laugh. That name carried echoes of both disbelief and redemption. It would serve as a reminder that God turns even the laughter of doubt into the joy of fulfilled promises. For a while the camp rejoiced. Laughter returned, not bitter this time, but genuine, overflowing with awe. Sarah declared, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." Genesis 21:6. But even in the joy, shadows were gathering. A quiet storm was building between the two sons of Abraham, one born of promise, the other of flesh. That storm would break during a celebration for Isaac's weaning, a feast lightly filled with music, dancing, and offerings of thanksgiving. But amidst the joy, Sarah noticed something unsettling. Ishmael, now a teenager, was not merely playing. The Hebrew text says he was Metzika, word that shares its root with Isaac's name. But in this context, the word implies mocking, scoffing, perhaps even threatening. Could it be that Ishmael was subtly declaring, "I am the firstborn, I am the rightful heir"? To Sarah, This was more than sibling rivalry. It was a spiritual threat. The inheritance, the covenant, could not be shared. Her response was swift and fierce. She turned to Abraham and demanded, "Cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." Genesis 21:10. It was not a cold request. It was a mother's desperate defense of destiny. But Abraham's heart shattered. The Bible tells us he was deeply distressed, not because of Sarah's words, but because of his son. Ishmael was still his child, his blood, his boy. Can you imagine the ache in his chest, having to choose between two sons? What would you have done, standing in Abraham's sandals? This moment, so deeply human yet prophetically charged, would become the turning point. A separation was coming, not just between brothers, but between nations. One path would lead to Israel, the other to the Arab peoples. And what happened next changed the course of history forever. Then came the moment no father should ever face, the moment when love and obedience would tear Abraham's heart in two. God spoke to him in the stillness and told him something difficult, something unimaginable. Do not be distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. But I will also make the son of the slave into a nation, because he is your offspring. Genesis 21:12-13. Though it cut him to the core, Abraham obeyed. At dawn, while the desert was still cool, he rose with heavy steps spread, water, a final embrace. That was all he could give Hagar and Ishmael before sending them away into the wilderness. Can you imagine the silence of that goodbye? A father's eyes filled with love, but also with finality. This was more than a family separation. It was the beginning of a spiritual fracture. From that moment on, the two brothers would walk different roads. Isaac would stay, inheriting the covenant, while Ishmael would become a wanderer once more. In Abraham's pain, we see the aching root of today's geopolitical wounds. Could it be that the tears of a father still echo in the cries of two peoples locked in conflict? For countless Muslims and Palestinians, the events of 1948, the founding of the State of Israel, were not seen as liberation, but as catastrophe. They call it the Nakba, the disaster, the mass displacement of their families, the erasure of their villages, and the beginning of a long exile. And whether consciously or not, many see their story reflected in that moment when Hagar and Ishmael were cast out into the desert. Could it be that today's wars are shadows of that ancient rejection? Yet even in exile, God did not forget. He had heard Abraham's plea. He had seen Hagar's tears. He had made a promise. Ishmael would not vanish. He would rise. He would become a great nation. But how do you tell a child that when the only thing he sees is the dust behind him and a closed tent before him? When Isaac was born, Ishmael didn't just lose a sibling. He lost a future. He lost his place. Isaac's arrival didn't bring the possibility of sharing. It brought total displacement. One son inherited the land, the name, the blessing. The other was cast into the margins. Doesn't this echo the deep resentment still felt in many parts of the Arab world? This wasn't just about envy. For Ishmael, Isaac's birth felt like extinction, as if his very identity was being erased. And this same dynamic plays out in modern times, as some in surrounding nations view Israel not merely as a country, but as a negation of their history, their narrative, their presence. Is the current tension really about land, or about something much older, much deeper? Sarah has piercing words. That boy will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac, still seem to reverberate across political platforms, fiery speeches, and underground manifestos. They are echoed almost word for word in the language of today's most radical voices. Iranian officials, for instance, have repeatedly called for Israel to be wiped from the map. And shockingly, this isn't just political rhetoric. It's theological. Embedded in some versions of Iranian, law is a hadith, a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, that stirs chilling visions of the end times. That hadith says, "The hour will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them, until the Jews hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will say, 'O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him.'" The only exception, the boxthorn tree said to remain silent, protecting the Jew who hides behind it. This hadith appears in the charter of Hamas, a powerful Palestinian political and militant organization. For some, it's more than metaphor. It is prophecy. And in a disturbing twist, this legend has even shaped real-world behavior. In a public address just a few years ago, a Palestinian imam claimed that Jews are planting thousands of boxthorn trees in Israeli settlements. Why? Because he said they know what is foretold, and they want to survive what's coming. Is it paranoia, prophecy, or something far more ancient unfolding in real time? And yet, underneath these dark layers of conflict, fear, and vengeance, a deeper question remains, one that shakes the ground under centuries of hostility. Is reconciliation even possible for two sons once torn apart by inheritance? Stay with this story, because what happens next may be the most unexpected twist of all. Though the path of Isaac and Ishmael was marked by heartbreak and separation, their destinies were never accidents. The pain of division was real, but so was God's intention behind it. These two brothers, though sent in opposite directions, were both woven into a divine plan, just not the same one. And to truly understand the tension between Israel and the Arab peoples today, we must return to the very heart of the matter, the covenant. This is the detail that changes everything. The covenant wasn't just a holy promise. It was a sacred bond, a divine agreement that established an unbreakable relationship between God and a chosen people. And here's the most crucial truth in this entire story. Only Isaac received it. But why? Why did the covenant pass through Isaac and not Ishmael, the firstborn? This question has echoed through generations, stirring emotions, conflict, and even wars. Yet God himself made the answer clear, not vague, not metaphorical, but exact. Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. Genesis 17:19. And then he affirms again, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Genesis 21:12. Was it unfair, or was it something far deeper than human logic could grasp? This decision sets a cornerstone of biblical truth. Divine election is not based on age, merit, or human plans. Ishmael was the result of human striving Sarah and Abraham's own attempt to fulfill God's promise their way. Isaac, on the other hand, was the result of a miracle. He came through supernatural intervention. Born to a barren woman and a man nearly a century old, he represented the impossible becoming possible. Could this be the reason why the covenant belonged to him? The spiritual lineage, the sacred calling, was tied to the miracle, not to effort. Ishmael was blessed, but Isaac was chosen. One received greatness on earth. The other inherited a role in the unfolding of salvation history. And that identity, being the people of the covenant, became the cornerstone of the Jewish soul. It gave them a sense of divine purpose, of chosenness. Through persecution, exile, and survival, it remained their anchor. But at the same time, it became a spark of tension with the world around them. How do you live as a chosen people in a world that often rejects the idea of divine favor? Yet even in the divine hierarchy of covenant, God's heart never turned away from Ishmael. When Abraham pleaded with God for his firstborn, afraid for what his future might hold, the Lord did not respond with silence. He replied with a promise that still echoes today. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. Genesis 17:20. And that promise was not empty. It was dramatically fulfilled in the wilderness, the place of exile, the place of rejection, the place where many expect God's presence to fade. But in that very place, as Hagar wept, and young Ishmael lay near death from thirst, an angel of God appeared again. "Do not be afraid," he said, "for God has heard the voice of the boy. Arise, lift him up, for I will make him into a great nation." Genesis 21:17-18. At that moment, a spring appeared. Water gushed from the dry ground, a lifeline in the desert. Not only was Ishmael's life saved, but so was the promise. And here is something extraordinary. Ishmael, like his brother Isaac, would become a father to 12. 12 princes would come from his line, just as 12 tribes would come from Jacob, Isaac's son. 2 lineages, 2 destinies, 2 nations reflecting one truth. God had not forgotten either child, but their paths were never the same. One would inherit the covenant. The other would inherit kingdoms. So the question rises in your heart: what matters more, earthly greatness or spiritual inheritance? Would you rather rule nations or be part of a divine story? And is it possible that, after all the conflict, both brothers were part of a bigger plan than either could see? The story is not over yet, and what's coming next may hold the key to the future of the entire world. Some say the promise made to Ishmael, that he would become a great nation, found its fulfillment in the astonishing rise of the Arab peoples. Across centuries and continents, they built vast empires, from the golden age of Baghdad to the towering architecture of Andalusia. Their language, culture, science, and literature enriched the world, leaving a legacy that continues to shape modern civilization. But this greatness, rooted in God's blessing, didn't just grow in silence. It emerged alongside a deeper struggle, a spiritual war for the true narrative of Abraham. Surprisingly, the story of Abraham and his sons does not end with their physical separation. It continues and intensifies through the sacred texts themselves. The Jewish Torah and the Islamic Quran offer differing versions of his life, and in those differences lies the seed of a profound and painful divide. The question isn't only who inherited the land, but who inherited the truth. According to Islamic tradition, the Torah and earlier scriptures were altered by human hands. The Quran therefore presents itself as God's final and uncorrupted revelation, a divine correction of past distortions. And within this correction lies one of the most critical turning points: the sacrifice. In the Bible, Abraham's ultimate test of faith, the moment that defines his covenant with God, occurs when he is commanded to offer Isaac, his beloved son, on the altar. This event seals the divine promise and the lineage through Isaac. But in Islamic tradition, the story shifts dramatically. The son on the altar is not Isaac, it is Ishmael. Why does this matter so much? Because in ancient faith traditions, being the son of the sacrifice is more than symbolic. It means being the chosen heir, not just of land or bloodline, but of divine favor. By placing Ishmael in the role of the sacrificial son, Islam not only elevates his spiritual status, but positions his lineage, including the Prophet Muhammad, as the rightful heirs to Abraham's promise. Do you see how this subtle change in story transforms the entire foundation of faith? Interestingly, the Quran never explicitly names the son, but generations of Islamic scholars have confidently identified him as Ishmael. This silent shift, unnoticed by many, creates a fault line between 3 great religions. Judaism and Christianity continue the story through Isaac, the covenant child. Islam, however, presents itself as a restoration, a corrected path, building its identity through Abraham and Ishmael, and culminating in the sacred city of Mecca. This isn't just a theological disagreement. It has shaped centuries of tension, conflict, and war. And nowhere is this more tangible than in the city of Jerusalem. There stone and scripture collide. At the heart of Jerusalem lies a sacred hill known as the Temple Mount. Harabait to Jews, Haram al-Sharif to Muslims. This single mountaintop holds 2 of Islam's holiest sites, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But it is also the most sacred site in Judaism, believed to be the place where Solomon's temple once stood and where God's presence dwelled. This is not simply one history on top of another. It is two contradictory truths occupying the same ground. Who does this mountain belong to? Who stood there first? And who speaks for the God of Abraham? Directly beneath the dome of the rock lies the foundation stone, a rock shrouded in layers of faith. In Jewish tradition, it is the spiritual epicenter of the world, the rock from which the universe was created, where Adam first stood, where Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac, and where the Holy of Holies once rested. But in Islam, this same rock is known as the very place from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended into heaven during his Isra and Miraj, his miraculous night journey. One stone, two ascensions, two stories that cannot both be true, and the tension doesn't end there. Just below this sacred platform stands the Western Wall, a place of weeping and wonder. For Jews, it is the closest remaining connection to their ancient temple, the last surviving structure of their holiest place, and a symbol of hope and longing. For centuries, Jews have pressed their prayers into its cracks, believing it to be the gateway to heaven. But Muslims know it differently. To them, it is the Barak Wall, the place where Muhammad tied his winged steed, Al-Barak, before ascending to the heavens. Two names, two meanings, two destinies. Can one city carry this much sacred weight? This is why control of Jerusalem is so fiercely contested. It's not merely about territory or politics. It's about the power to define the story, to declare whose version of Abraham's sacrifice is the true one. Is it Isaac, who stood on the altar? Or was it Ishmael, who truly inherits the spiritual covenant and who holds the key to the most contested site on earth? And maybe the most haunting question of all, can there ever be peace between two nations when their most sacred truths seem to rise from the same soil, but speak with different voices? The story continues, but its resolution remains one of the greatest mysteries of all time. But in a story so heavy with sorrow, prophecy offers something no one expects: reconciliation. Yes, even after centuries of conflict, betrayal, and bloodshed, the Bible points to an ending that isn't bitter, but beautifully redemptive. Could it be that all this time, buried beneath the ruins of war and ideology, the path to peace was already written in the lives of the very brothers who began this story? When Abraham, the father of both nations, breathed his last, Scripture reveals a striking and silent scene. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him. Genesis 25-9. Just one simple sentence, but within it lies a world of meaning. After years of separation, after the pain of rejection and exile, Isaac and Ishmael stood side by side once more. There was no argument, no battle, only two sons mourning their father. For a moment, the past dissolved. And the prophetic meaning of that reunion continues to echo to this day. According to Jewish tradition, the order of their names in the verse is not accidental. Isaac is mentioned first, even though Ishmael was the older brother. That Ishmael allowed Isaac, the heir of the covenant, to take the lead is seen as an act of humility and deep spiritual surrender, a gesture of reconciliation. Could that single act have been a divine signal? A preview of what is still to come? The ancient principle Ma'abat Simon Leinem, that deeds of the fathers are signs for the children, comes alive here. This moment, simple and solemn, is not just a historical footnote. It is a prophecy, a whisper from the past to the future saying, peace is possible. Even though the covenant, the spiritual lineage, was given to Isaac, God never revoked his promise to Ishmael. He was never rejected, never cast away from divine attention. Both sons were blessed. Both sons were loved. Both sons remain Abraham's. And today, in a world where news cycles seem to spin only stories of destruction, could it be that seeds of peace are being planted in places we least expect? Not long ago, in the middle of rising tensions with Iran and renewed violence, something miraculous took place, an echo of that ancient burial scene. Arab nations such as the United Arab Emirates, a reign, and others took a step few thought possible. They chose diplomacy over division. They extended their hand toward Israel. And the name of these peace treaties, the Abraham Accords. What a stunning detail. For the first time in modern memory, the focus wasn't on what divided them, but on what united them. Politicians, diplomats, and leaders publicly acknowledged what prophets and mystics have always known. Jews and Muslims are descendants of the same man, Abraham. This was no coincidence. It was a declaration that beneath layers of religion and politics, there lies a shared origin, a shared father, a shared calling. What if that recognition is the beginning of something much bigger? And there's another sign, one not often discussed on television or in political speeches, but one that whispers in hidden places of the soul. In the deepest, most mystical streams of both traditions Jewish Kabbalah and Islamic Sufis, there has always been a quiet, transcendent unity. These mystics were not trying to prove their faith superior. They weren't fighting over land or scripture. They were searching for God himself. And in that search, something miraculous happened. They began to speak the same spiritual language. Both the Kabbalist and the Sufi described the soul as a traveler moving through ascending spiritual worlds to return to its divine source. Both describe God not just as creator, but as infinite, boundless light. And they speak of love so deep, so fiery, so all-consuming that it burns away ego, identity, and fear until only union with the divine remains. Can you imagine a Jewish mystic and a Muslim mystic meeting, not to debate, but to weep in awe before the same presence? In a way, these mystics did what politicians often fail to do. They met at the tomb of Abraham, not with flags, but with open hearts. They understood something our world desperately needs, that in the realm of spirit, labels begin to fade. And what matters is the fire of longing for God. If they saw the same light, if they reached toward the same heaven, then how have we fallen so far apart? The answer lies where this story began. In the echo of the fathers, Isaac and Ishmael made choices. And their choices, blessed, broken, and prophetic, cast long shadows over their descendants. We are still walking in those shadows. But if the past still speaks, maybe it can still change. Maybe we can return to that desert grave. Maybe we can be like Isaac and Ishmael, not enemies, not competitors, but children mourning what was lost and honoring the same Father. Could it be that peace won't be won in palaces, but in the hearts of those who finally choose to stop fighting over the inheritance and begin honoring the one who gave it? Throughout this journey, we have walked two ancient paths, one forged in endless hostility, the other paved with the painful hope of human reconciliation. The story of Isaac and Ishmael has led us through deserts, altars, empires, and sacred stones. And yet, despite centuries of division, there is a third path hidden in plain sight. A path the Bible reveals, not one crafted by politics, nor dependent on the shifting wills of nations, but rooted in something far more powerful, divine intervention. This third way comes through the person of Jesus. Christianity does not present Jesus as just another prophet among many. He is introduced as the ultimate answer to the ancient wound between brothers, a healing not from man, but from heaven itself. But how does Jesus resolve the conflict between the children of Isaac and the children of Ishmael? The answer lies not in choosing a side, but in transcending the sides altogether. Jesus does not step into history to champion Isaac over Ishmael or the Jews over the Arabs. Instead, he invites both into a new kind of family, one not built by bloodlines, but by grace. The Apostle Paul captures this radical vision when he writes, "Christ is our peace. He has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility." Ephesians 2:14. This dividing wall isn't just symbolic. It represents centuries of bitterness, identity, violence, and revenge. And yet, in Christ, Paul says it is torn down. What does this mean? It means that when someone unites with Christ, They receive a new identity, one that doesn't erase their culture or history, but lifts them into something greater. They are no longer just Jews or Arabs, descendants of Isaac or Ishmael, but members of a new creation, a spiritual family bound not by ancestry, but by the Spirit of God. But when does this miraculous reconciliation begin? Christianity teaches that it unfolds in two stages. The first is happening right now in the quiet, unseen places of the human heart. In communities where Arab and Jewish believers gather as one, not in denial of their pasts, but in the power of their shared future, despite political tensions around them. They break bread together. They worship together. They forgive each other. And in doing so, they offer living proof that peace is not just possible, it has already begun. But the final act is yet to come. The second stage is future. The Bible proclaims that complete reconciliation will be fully realized at the return of Jesus Christ, the second coming. In that moment, he will not come as a mere teacher or martyr. He will return as king, as judge, and as the Prince of Peace to establish justice and end all hostilities once and for all. But how will he do this? Again, Paul answers, his purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace. Ephesians 2:15. This is not just a truce. It's a transformation. The Messiah doesn't negotiate between enemies. He reshapes them into family. And this vision echoes the oldest prophecies of the Old Testament. The book of Isaiah foretells a future where the wolf will live with the lamb. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain. Isaiah 11:6-9. Imagine that not only peace, but a world where even the instincts of conflict are undone. Isaiah also names this coming king. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Isaiah 9:6. His kingdom will have no end, and his peace no expiration. This is not political peace secured by treaties, but eternal peace written on human hearts. But to reach it, Jesus introduces an idea so radical, it overturns the very foundations of revenge. He calls his followers to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:44. Who dares to love the very ones who have wounded them? And yet, this is the only way to break the cycle that began between Isaac and Ishmael. Not retaliation, not domination, but redemption. So the question remains a question that belongs not to history, but to you. Which path will the children of Abraham choose? Will they continue walking through the desert of division and hatred, or will they meet again at their father's tomb, not as enemies, but as brothers? Will you be one who continues the echo of conflict, or one who helps fulfill the prophecy of peace? The story you've just heard is not just a lesson in history. It's a mirror for our world today. From the tents of Abraham to the cities of modern Israel. And the Arab nations, the echoes of Isaac and Ishmael continue to shape nations, beliefs, and lives. But through all the pain, division, and spiritual questions, one truth remains unshaken. God never gave up on either son. Whether you descend from Isaac or Ishmael, whether you stand with one tradition or are simply searching for truth, the invitation remains open. The Bible doesn't leave us in conflict. It calls us to something greater. Reconciliation is not just a dream. It has already begun in hearts that choose love over hate, humility over pride, and unity over division. And the final answer, the ultimate peace, rests not in the hands of kings or empires, but in the return of the Prince of Peace. So we ask you, what role will you play in this story? Will you be a voice of division or a bridge of hope? Will you carry forward the pain of the past or join those who stand at Abraham's tomb and choose peace? If this video touched your heart or opened your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful content that brings together history, prophecy, and truth. Leave your thoughts in the comments. especially if you believe peace is still possible. Type Abraham's peace below if you're standing with reconciliation today. And if you feel led to support this mission of truth and restoration, you can now do so by clicking the Super Thanks button. Every gift helps us reach more people with these vital messages. And whether you give or not, know this: we are deeply grateful for your presence here. Until next time, may the God of Abraham bless you with wisdom, courage, and peace.